school football in North Georgia. Hello, everyone. I'm Will Cooper, joined alongside my co-host, good friend, longtime broadcast partner, the man, the myth, the legend, that is Art Mosley. Art, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Coop. You said the man, the myth, the legend. I just want to know there's a lot of myth in there, and the legend part is really in my own mind. But I could not be doing any better. So good to be here with you today on a Tuesday. Well, we've got some, at least in North Georgia, some wonderful fall weather. We got to do a Texas weather check to see what's going on over there in the Austin area.
It's hot. So you guys enjoy that, and I'm not bitter about it at all. No, we had a couple of nights that were really, really nice. I will pop up a video for you now that shows what our Friday night looked like this past Friday night. So you can see what it was like here as we're trying to take in a game. But yeah, it was crazy, man. But yeah, we're getting back into the 90s again. It sounds like we're going to be in the furnace for the next 20 days or so.
Wow.
So again, y'all pray for me. Y'all just send your good vibes that way, and every chance you get to take a deep breath, just point it towards the west so some of that cold air comes our way, man. But I'm happy for y'all. Glad that it's feeling good over there.
Appreciate it, Coop. Look, our temperatures hovering lows tonight, going to be in the upper 50s, Coop, as we speak on Tuesday. As we get closer to game day, Friday, high temperatures look to be around the low to mid 80s, with lows dropping probably up into the upper 60s by the time those football games end on Friday night. So that's your weather report sponsored by the Hickory Flat Garlic Company of Canton, Georgia. And with that said, Coop,
Do y'all ship to Texas, by the way?
we're not shipping anywhere right now. It's um, I want to segue into high school football here in Georgia. We'll get to we'll touch base a little bit later for our Texas football report from Friday night. And as you mentioned, a lot of games rained out. The weather wasn't a factor there. Here locally, all of our games got off, I believe, without a hitch. I think maybe Cartersville and Calhoun was playing just a little bit to our west. They had a long weather delay, did not end that game till 1 o'clock in the morning here on the East Coast. So we're thankful that our games were not delayed that much. But again, all county teams were in action. They all got their games finished. And Coop, we're going to talk about them here today, and we're not going to waste any time. We're going to start with the barn burner first at Tommy Baker Field as Cherokee and Lambert combined for 90 points, Coop, on Friday night. That's the second time those two teams have really put on a show in terms of offensive performance. We talked about Ethan Daughtery for Lambert. He had a big night. Zach Parker had a big night. Brandon Hamilton had a big night. Jack Rubin had a big night for the Warriors. But ultimately, they were done in late in that kind of middle to the late part of the fourth quarter, could not hang on to a lead, and they fall to Lambert. Coop, your thoughts on that ball game?
Yeah, it's a little bit of deja vu all over again from last season, which I didn't think we would say. You talk about a drastic shift in just production, right? We're talking about a team that got shut out by Sequoyah, and then finally started to find their footing last week against Pope. And then we come into this week, and a Cooper Predictor was saying, Cherokee 21 would be about right for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Well, then they obviously put up a big crooked number. Unfortunately, Lambert was able to put up an even more crooked one. But look, to me, it goes back to the fact that for the first time this season, their starting quarterback at Cherokee got to start consecutive games.
Mm-hmm.
That's Zach Parker, right? No injuries for him. So finished the game 23 of 39, just shy of 300 yards, 3 touchdowns and 1 pick. Jack Rubin, you mentioned him, 12 grabs, 156 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's going to be one of those connections that we might see develop throughout the year with those two guys getting some reps in. Obviously, Parker taking the reps with the ones now, getting familiar with that receiving core. I think that'll only improve. And then, as you mentioned, Brandon Hamilton continuing his good work, 15 carries, 155 yards, and a touchdown as well. look, it kind of comes back to the same story that they had last year, right? They've now lost a couple of games by one possession or just over one possession. If you take River Ridge and obviously this game, you'd like to see those turned around. But what you do hope is that they're learning something because the region schedule starts this week, and we'll get into that game in just a second. But I liked what I saw from Cherokee, to be honest. Again, I think after the Sequoyah game, as much as the defense was a question, giving up 61 points, it was really the offense's inability to possess the football was really the biggest question for me at the end of that. So they've done that for 2 weeks in a row, one for a win, one for a loss. But I do think Cherokee is a highly competitive team. I think that reflects in what we're kind of seeing with the math right now. So I like where Cherokee's at. I was impressed with the performance, especially of Zach Parker. We got to remember, this guy's a freshman, right?
Right.
This is,
Right.
first varsity year for all high school, right? So, him going 23 of 39 for just shy of 300 yards with 3 touchdowns and a pick, that's a heck of a performance for a guy that walked into the building late summer, right? He transferred
Yeah.
late. So, I think that they'll only get better as the season progresses on offense. I think the question does go back to the defense. And can you stop teams from scoring 40 plus points when your offense helps you out? I mentioned this last week, but HBO, help a brother out, man. The Cherokee defense has to HBO with the offense a little bit at some point. So I do think that'll be something to keep an eye on as they get ready for their game this week against North Paulding.
Yeah, you're right, Coop. They will face a North Paulding team that comes in with a 3-1 record. We can go ahead and talk about this matchup here. North Paulding really getting it done on the ground. They're averaging 255 yards a game rushing, 184.3 yards a game passing. They've got a senior quarterback in Tyler Nyer. I think he's a guy who can probably play quarterback or punt at the next level. But really, it's going to come down to a couple of running backs for North Paulding. Uh, Bryson Morris Martinez, and then James Skelly. James Skelly leading the team by just a hair. He's got 353 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns. Morris Martinez has 351 yards and 5 touchdowns. And then you throw in Khalil Harrell, who's also got 33 carries, 273 yards and a touchdown. Nyer has done nothing in 4 games but thrown for 709 yards and 4 touchdowns and not thrown an interception. So this has been a pretty solid North Paulding Wolfpack offense. They're averaging 36.7 points a game and allowing 12.7. I know one of the things we talk about is strength of schedule. I feel like they played a pretty decent schedule. Last week it was a win over their county rival, South Paulding, and got a big win. So I think the Warriors will have their hands full in a team that might look a little bit more like Sequoyah than any of their other previous opponents.
Yeah, North Paulding has played a really good schedule up to this point as well. Wins against Parkview, East Paulding, and then South Paulding. Their only loss coming to a 2-point loss against Harrison, who all of a sudden looks like, Harrison of 2018,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So look, North Paulding has a heck of a record coming into this game. They do look sharp, and to your point, they are a run-heavy team. I think kind of the game plan is going to be for North Paulding to possess the ball, keep it out of the hands of Cherokee, because Cherokee's offense is a force to be reckoned with. At least they have been over the last couple games. And we can kind of excuse the Pope game and say, yeah, okay, but what have they done outside of that? But Lambert, to me, was a quality opponent going into
Mm-hmm.
this game. I thought they would win by a wider margin. So I like where the matchup is for North Paulding. It does concern me a little bit in terms of the defense. Again, we saw what Sequoyah was able to do running the football. And again, I think for Cherokee, the key is to do the little things right here. Right. Obviously there was an interception for Zach Parker, but Cherokee's defense did have an interception as well last week, I believe. So, even in the turnover margin, they're going to need to be +1, +2 this week. Brandon Hamilton, I think, may be the key to this game because as much as Cherokee or North Paulding would like to keep it out of the hands of Cherokee, I think the inverse is also correct. So getting Brandon Hamilton his carries, again, I mean, look, he went 15 carries for 155 yards. That doesn't take a math degree to tell you he was averaging over 10 yards a carry last week and was averaging well over 8 last week as well. So highly effective runner, making the most of the carries that he gets. I feel like that's going to be the key to this game. I do lean more towards North Paulding, but Art, I will defer to you on the first one for what you think of this game.
Oh, Coop, I need to make a correction. I said North Paulding allowing 12. I think I said they're allowing about 12.7 points a game. They're actually allowing 24 points a game. So they have had a propensity to give up some points. So I think that will work well for Cherokee, who's an offense, as you mentioned, is kind of growing into its own with that young quarterback. With this will be his third consecutive start. They've sacked opposing quarterbacks 15 times, but you just talked about the game plan for Cherokee will likely be to feed Brandon Hamilton. So that might take some of that pass rush away with the North Paulding defensive front really keying in on stopping the run. They have intercepted four passes on the year. I think the difference here in this ball game is I think both teams will look to establish a run, but for me, it's the fact that North Paulding has three well-traveled, established running backs, and Cherokee has one, and it depends on if you count Torrey Hearn, maybe 1.5. So I think not only just that, they have more. They've been doing it at a little bit better clip, and they've got a senior quarterback who's been pretty accurate this season. I think that might be a little bit too much to overcome. If this game gets to be a track meet, I just don't know if Cherokee can keep up. I don't think this will be a blowout by any stretch of the imagination. I think this is you're probably looking at another game that's within 8 to 10 points, but I think it's as a North Paulding Wolfpack that kind of returns a favor last year as Cherokee went over to North Paulding and really put a number on them, beat them by I believe it was 21 points. I think North Paulding returns a favor, but maybe it's a 10-point margin of victory, and I don't think it's a 50-40 game this week. Maybe I could see 30-40. 27-37, something like that. But those are my thoughts on the outcome this week.
Yeah, the Cooper Predictor is not buying what Cherokee's selling yet again. They have this game as a 56-point win for North Paulding. I do not personally think it will be that way. I think Cherokee's improvement isn't being weighed enough into the math yet. So with that being said, I personally am also going to pick North Paulding. I think it'll be 14. Now, I do like the total number of points that we're going with here. Again, the Cooper Predictor puts it at 84. I think that might be correct, but I think it's going to be a lot closer than that. So, obviously maybe looking more towards that, 56-42, something like that. I could see. But at the end of the day, I don't see it being a massive blowout, but I do see it being high scoring for sure.
All right, you're going with high scoring. I'm going with medium scoring, and
I'm about to
I think
say 30 to, it wasn't
it's kind
exactly
of
low
high too.
scoring.
Yeah, yeah. 37-27 is pretty high scoring, I guess. So we're both.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not as high scoring as 64 points is probably pretty high scoring. So that's our thoughts on the Cherokee Warriors this week. We wish the Warriors the best of luck as they open up region play at home at Tommy Baker Field on Friday night at 7:30. Coop, next up for us in alphabetical order are the Creekview Grizzlies, a team that was winless going up against a team that was, if I'm not mistaken, undefeated going into last week. We talked about, or I talked about, Lassiter's ability to pass the ball. Creekview did a number on them last week. Coop came away with the win. Depending on who you ask, maybe it was impressive, maybe it wasn't. Creekview really put the game out of reach at halftime, and you'll talk about this, I believe, but their offensive line had a stellar performance. Coop, they win 48-30 over Lassiter, pick up their first win of the season, go 1-0 in the region, and really everything that they want is right in front of them. Now, we'll have a chance to talk to Coach Williams here momentarily as he's joining us on the podcast this week. But Coop, I want to get your thoughts on this ball game last week between Creekview and Lassiter.
Yeah, look, it's kind of at that point where it's like, yeah, they're 1-3, but they're also 1-0 in the region. To your point, it's no love lost. So for me, I like where Creekview's at. I felt like they did a really good job last week of establishing the running game. The team ran 350 yards across the board. Part of that being Alex Penrod coming back to quarterback after missing last week. 15 carries, 121 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, and then Carson Lott with 18 carries, 167 yards, and 3 touchdowns for himself as well. Again, the offense not relying on the pass super heavily. Alex went 7-12 for 89 yards and a touchdown. Big thing, no interceptions. They were clean in that regard. And the biggest change for me last week to this week, last week they averaged 2.7 yards per carry. And then the week before, or excuse me, 2 weeks ago, they averaged 2.7 yards per carry. This past week, they averaged 8.8 yards per carry. The efficiency was there. And that's all you can ask for when you're running the football. Now, 8.8 is a lot. You're usually comfortable with sitting around 4 yards per carry. So, not surprising they ended up winning by, over 2 possessions. But at the end of the day, I thought it was a good team win for Creekview. The offensive line was featured as a line of distinction on Georgia High School Football Daily, rightfully so. Again, it's not when the whole team runs for 350 yards, it's usually because of your offensive line more than it is your running back or your quarterback or anybody, one person carrying the football. So that was a rightful distinction for them. But to your point, they got everything in front of them. They're going to face a Riverwood team this week that we'll talk to Coach Williams about in just a second. But again, they're in the region schedule. They're playing their best football, getting ready for week 5 of the season, which is exactly where you want to be if you're a coach.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree, Coop. It's you kind of set yourself up, and one of the things I'd like to ask, and we'll talk to Coach Williams about, is kind of that strength of schedule early on, and how that has prepared them for this run. And without further ado, Coop, I think we'll go ahead. I think we do have Coach Williams calling in. Let's go ahead and go to him and get his thoughts on last week and talk about their upcoming opponent this week.
And thank you for joining us on the North Georgia Sports Report podcast. And joining us now is the head coach of the Creekview Grizzlies, Coach Trevor Williams. Coach, thank you for being back with us.
Thanks for having us, guys. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely, Coach. We always look forward to it as well. And, Coach, great time to talk to you. Obviously, a big win last week, opening up the region schedule against Lassiter. I think for probably the story of our area was the offensive line getting that recognition on Georgia High School Football Daily and the team coming together for 350 rush yards. Tell us a little bit about that. And did you know that going into the week of practice that you felt like you had seen a turn there, or was that something that you felt like had been building for a while?
Yeah, we felt like it had been building for a while between, finding the right pieces to the puzzle, getting guys healthy. It's always been the game plan here since we've been at Creekview was, you have to establish the run first. You got to establish line of scrimmage and then create explosives through play action passes and those types of things. So it was nice for it to come together and for those guys to get that recognition, but it's weeks of hard work and those guys gelling and creating a unit. Ryan Sullivan is a returning starter. Glover had some time there. Journey Cowart had some time there, but we've been shuffling pieces in and out due to injury and things and some youth. So it's nice to get a 5 you feel good about and something you can move forward with.
Coach, one of the things that Will and I talked about last week and when we looked at this game and kind of previewed it on the podcast was the strength of schedule between your two school, the two schools competing in that game, you guys and Lassiter. And we took a hard look at your strength of schedule and, two things. One, the actual strength of opponents just on paper, and then their record. When you guys schedule this season, I know it's a 2-year cycle, but with this young group, how are you able to keep their focus when they're playing against some of the top competition in North Central Georgia week in and week out heading into region play?
Yeah, you set the non-region schedule and you hope it challenges you. You hope it exposes some weak areas and gets you ready for region play so that you're battle tested when it matters. You don't want your toughest region games to be the first time you've really faced that tough competition. Now, we also didn't know that we were going to have some of the adversity that we've had over the first couple weeks and those types of things. But, man, our kids love to compete. They didn't back down. They didn't waver with Calhoun. They didn't back down. They didn't waver against Cambridge. We score before halftime to go 14-7, have a drive going right out of half. Unfortunately, ended in a turnover, and then they were able to put some scores on the board there pretty quick in the third quarter. But our guys were up to the challenge, and we challenged them again. Turn the scoreboard off. Let's chase improvement. Let's chase being the best version of us, and let's really peak when we get to the region and be playing our best football when we get to September and October, November.
Coach, one of the things that Will and I talked about last week and when we looked at this game and kind of previewed it on the podcast was the strength of schedule between your two schools, the two schools competing in that game, you guys and Lassiter. And we took a hard look at your strength of schedule and,
Coach, you guys have such a deep running back room this year with Vines and Carson Lott got obviously most of the attention this past week, over 150 yards and 3 touchdown carries. Talk us through that running back room. Is that something that when you go into the preparation for the week, do you have a guy that you kind of feel like this is going to be who we give the ball to most this week, or is it the hot hand as the night progresses?
Kind of the hot hand, and I'll give Mason Munn a shout out this offseason. And I told you guys in the preseason show, he came to me and said, Coach, whatever we need to do to win, I'm in. And I said, all right, well, it may mean playing some more defense and sharing some carries. And he said, absolutely, I'm in. And he's done a phenomenal job for us at outside linebacker, and then flipping over and carrying the football when we need him to. But Carson Lott had a phenomenal week, and he's done a really nice job. Travis Vines is an explosive type runner. He's a home run hitter. And then Aiden Grice is another name. We'll go 4 deep at that position. And he got 1 carry the other night and took it 56 to the house. So he's another name that I'll throw in that room of guys that, you better bring your A game every day at practice because you got guys nipping at your heels.
Coach, I had a chance to watch you guys play that Cambridge game. Had a bird's eye view for that one, and one of the things I saw the difference, at least for me, from week 1 to week 3 is, like you said, your guys felt like you guys competed and you improved. And I know the score might not be indicative of that for people who are just reading scores. One of the units that I continue to be impressed with in your tenure as head coach at Creekview as a secondary, and a couple of guys I just want to spot out, J.D. Russell and Hayden Hanson, I felt like did a really good job covering some really explosive receivers a couple of weeks ago. Also, you guys kind of put the clamps on one of the leading passers in the state this past week at Lassiter. Can you talk about your secondary and Hanson and Russell? And if there's anybody else I'm forgetting, I know you've got some injuries back there also. You talked about adversity, but how is that growth from those guys been this season?
Well, man, both of them got significant time as sophomores last year and grew up a ton this offseason. Both have had tremendous offseasons in the weight room. Austin Penrod at safety is Cale Williams 2.0. I feel like we've had since we've been on campus, you went Cale Williams to Evan Whalen to Austin Penrod, and it's like they're the same player. Both extremely explosive, physical. He'll be playing on Saturdays. And then, some young guys have had to step in with some injuries. Caleb Barkwell's played well. Hudson Mondich has played well. Jasper Gillum stepped in at safety for a couple games. And then getting Ben Thoreau back, who, is one of the top high jumpers in the state. As a sophomore, big 6'1" corner, super athletic. We got a chance to be really good back there, and Coach Martin, our defensive coordinator, is doing a really nice job of continuing to challenge those guys and push them to be as good as they possibly can be.
And Coach, this week you've got another region game against Riverwood coming up. Riverwood is a team that's kind of been up and down over the past few years, but obviously a challenge always when it comes to region games. What have you seen from Riverwood in your film studies, and what's it going to take for you guys to be successful on Friday?
Well, I had I still have the memories of 2021 and how good they were when they won the region. With that special quarterback and a couple of those receivers they had running all over the place, and even the year before in 2020 with 2 Division I defensive ends and 2 Power 5 corners. So the talent and the athleticism is never in question when you're playing Riverwood, and it's the same story. The quarterback, left-handed kid, does a really nice job distributing the football. They've got 3 backs that you almost can't tell the difference between them, and they can go to the house anytime they touch it. And then their defensive front is big and physical, and they do a nice job mixing coverages in the secondary. So, again, the record may not show it, but that's a football team that's very dangerous, and we're doing our best as coaches not to take them anything but the next game and try to make sure our guys are focused on, again, it's like I told them after the game against Lassiter, whatever the scoreboard says, good or bad, don't let that dictate how we come to work on Monday and how we chase improvement.
Coach, you certainly you guys have homecoming. It's homecoming week for Creekview this week. Excuse me, and I think that might be the best message of never mind their record. You guys are trying to defend a couple things: defend home turf. Nope, nobody wants to lose on homecoming, probably for school pride, and then maybe most importantly, another chance to go 1-0 this week in the region. So I am sure, as always, the Grizzly Den will be rocking. I believe the weather is going to be fantastic on Friday night. So folks in and around the Owen Store area and the east side of east central northeast side of Cherokee County, definitely come out and support the Grizzlies. I know, again, I can say a plug for this because I've seen you guys play a couple of times. I feel validated by saying this. This is a team that's on the rise and improving week in and week out. And coach, I felt like, you guys scored that touchdown against Cambridge in the first quarter or right before halftime. And I felt like, wow, this is might be kind of what they needed to get over the hump. Maybe not this week, but just to get in the end zone. And I saw a lot of kids competing. So I can guarantee that your guys are going to get out there and get after it on Friday night. We wish you the best of luck on homecoming against Riverwood, and let's go 2-0 in the region.
I appreciate it, guys. And when you get to region play, you can't afford to slip up. This region's too good. I mean, you got Sequoyah playing as well as they're playing, Sprayberry, Riverwood, Woodstock, Pope. I mean, you got to take every game like it's a one-game playoff. During this 7-game stretch, I've challenged our guys to lock in and make sure that it's literally 1 week at a time. And I know that's cliche, but if you can get a bunch of 15 to 18-year-old kids to lock in and have that mentality, you give yourself a chance.
Well, Coach, I think y'all have a chance this week. We wish you the best of luck, and we look forward to catching up with you later on this season.
So again, thank you to Coach Williams for being with us again on the podcast. Glad we were able to get him back. We have not talked to him since early August. Again, it's just, we try to get every coach in when we can, but, obviously with our game of the weeks that we rotate through, sometimes it's a little bit more difficult, but glad to have Coach Williams back on the podcast.
Absolutely good to speak to him. Good to get his thoughts on his team that's young and improving. And that improvement showed on Friday night against, again, we talked about a Lassiter team that was throwing the ball all over the yard. We talked about maybe the strength of schedule. And I think, Coach Williams, let's turn the scoreboard off and, hey, does this impact how we get better for next week? And I think that message will preach week in and week out. And they had some success against Lassiter last week. You mentioned their run game. He talked about his offensive line. He talked about his 4 stable of backs, this unselfishness of Mason Munn moving from running back to linebacker and making way for some of these other backs to help figure out a way to make this the best version of Creekview that they can be this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, turning off the scoreboard, playing, going play by play. I heard a coach one time say, it's my job as the coach to keep track of the score and to put us in a position to win, and for our coordinators to put us in the position to call the right plays. The player's job is to execute the play, that specific play. All you should be focused on is the play that I'm giving you right now. That's what it is. So I love that mentality, man. I think that's so key, especially because it's so easy to be disheartened by what you've seen week over week. Now, again, we have the rosy retrospection of being able to stop and say, well, Calhoun's Calhoun. North Forsyth looks pretty good over there in 6A in the highest classification, and Cambridge looking pretty good, although that loss to Denmark,
yeah,
we'll get into that. Yeah, we'll talk about it later. but still, they played some really quality teams. Again, I thought that this was a game that Creekview was going to win. They won by 18. Cooper Predictor had them winning by 17. So we were right there on the number. It agrees. It's still loving Creekview. The Cooper Predictor still buying what the Grizzlies are selling. A lot more high scoring than we thought. But still, the margin of victory was there. So, going to face Riverwood this week. Coach Williams was talking about some of the nightmare memories of Riverwood back in the early 2020s, which obviously we were there for. We remember that too. This team does not necessarily look like that team. Riverwood licking their wounds after a 56-0 loss against the Chiefs last week. So Creekview looking in prime position to take advantage of that for their homecoming game this week.
Yeah, and then we know that Riverwood team is a little bit banged up last week. Statistically, most recent stats we have for them updated. I'll just go over their leaders here through 2 games. Through the first 2 games, Noah Myers leading them in rushing with 194 yards. AJ Rahal, the left-handed southpaw quarterback, 355 yards, 4 passing TDs, and his primary target, Zach Stair, 9 receptions, 220 yards. Again, these are stats through 2 games, and Stair, probably one of the top receivers when it's all said and done in the region, probably won't get the recognition that a lot of other receivers get. But Coop had a chance to watch this young man last year. He's got game-breaking speed, does a great job of catching the ball with his hands away from his body, is a great target for Ray Hall. And if Ray Hall does have time to throw and Stair can get behind the defense, it can be a lot of trouble for opposing teams. They will try to run the football. They play out of the shotgun. I just think this is a team in Riverwood that is a little bit overmatched again. And what Creekview is going to try to do, I think they're going to go back to what Coach Williams told us. Hey, we've always wanted to establish the run here and be a physical football team. And I think they're going to try to do that as well and impose their will, as you mentioned, on homecoming, make it a big night. And I just don't know if Riverwood has enough in the tank they're bringing up from Sandy Springs on Friday night to rain on the parade. I just think that the way that they ran the ball last week gives Creekview a lot more confidence. And I think confidence goes a long way for a young team. And they're going to get out here on Friday night and say, hey, we did it against Lassiter. We're going to handle Riverwood. And I don't think this is a game where Creekview's looking past Riverwood. I think they're excited to get back and play somebody that maybe they can, gosh, I hate to say it, but whip up on a little bit this week and kind of get right or continue to get right as they've got a big one coming up next week. We'll leave that for next week, but this is a game I think that Creekview should win handily. Coop, I'm going to go ahead and go first again. I like whether it's Travis Vines, whether it's Carson Lott, Aiden Grice, Mason Munn, doesn't matter who's in the backfield. I think Creekview wins this big. I think 24, and I think that might be a little bit generous to Riverwood. I think it might be worse than that.
Yeah, so the Cooper Predictor puts it right at a 17-point win for Creekview, 24-7, the estimated final on that one. I still think it's not figured out that Creekview's offense is better. It's a very similar story to Cherokee. I don't think it's quite done with some of the struggles they had early season. I mean, by the time they got to this point last week, they were averaging 3.3 points per game. So
Sure.
still trying to average it out. I do think it'll be higher scoring. I agree with you on that. I will keep my 17-point margin, but my personal opinion, I will put it at 31-14 for the Grizzlies. So I'll give each team an extra touchdown.
All right. Yeah, I think I do think Riverwood gets in the end zone this week. I know they were shut out last week. I think they get in the end zone this week, but I think Creekview will handle them. Maybe we're looking at 38-14 for that 24-point margin of victory, in my opinion. But again, homecoming week. So if you're a fan of the Grizzlies, get over there and support your team. Homecoming parade Friday night and enjoy. Again, it was what should be fantastic weather in Cherokee County. Coop, we're going to move it along. Our next up, a team that has been at least controversial in our power rankings or ratings this season, the Etowah Eagles went and beat up on Chapel Hill. I think a game that we both anticipated that Etowah would dominate. Coop, they get the job done. They move on. Now they have a bye week. Thoughts on that game last week for Etowah as they beat Chapel Hill, and you can decide if it was a beat up or not, but they took care of business nonetheless.
Yeah, 31-12 win for the Eagles. Zeke Douglas, a little bit more quiet of a night passing the ball, but wasn't necessarily needed. 6 of 8, 94 yards and an interception, no touchdowns. But Mike Goins had 19 carries and 143 yards, and that's from the running back position. We talked last week about how maybe they didn't need that. Maybe they didn't need that running back position, but I made the comparison to Etowah earlier, 2022, 2023, talking about how they had Xavier Mahoney and they had Reese Weir and how much more dynamic they were with that.
Sure.
And obviously that was a team that put up 50 points per game for the first 4 games. So, we can't compare statistics. But with that being said, I feel like that with Zeke Douglas and Mike Goins, those two guys, if they get going at the same time, we could see something very similar similar to the numbers that we saw from those great Etowah teams at that point. The other thing that I saw was Drake Mason, who had a big interception pick six all the way back in the Battle of Town Lake, 2 rushing touchdowns. So trying out some new faces at running back as well as needed. I think for Etowah, it shows that they're multiple. They're able to do multiple things. If they want to go with Zeke Douglas and pass the ball around to Walker Hughes and some of those big targets that they've added, they can. Or if they want to grind it out and have a back that's going to carry it for nearly 150 yards, then they can do that too. One name I want to continue to mention, and I'll quit mentioning him when he stops sacking people, but that's Cooper Hendricks, 2 sacks again. That's 5 on the year through 4 games. So he's becoming a name to know. And on the defensive side of the ball for the Eagles, I mean, that's about all you can say, I think, in terms of what Etowah did. Again, they did it in a different way. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it prepares them. They have the bye week this week to go back, review the footage, obviously finishing the out of region schedule 2-2. Some things you love, some things they'd like to improve on, mostly finishing games when you kind of review that Sprayberry and Campbell footage. But I think that's something they can work on this week. So I really like where Etowah's at.
I tell you what, Coop, this is a team that's averaging 30.5 points per game. You mentioned their 2 losses, Sprayberry and Campbell. Both of those teams undefeated right now, 7-0 combined record against those 2 teams they lost against. Again, 5-point loss to Campbell a couple of weeks ago. And then I believe an 18-point loss to Sprayberry in a game they were leading in the fourth quarter. Sprayberry comes back and scores 24 unanswered. And that kind of does end the Eagles. This is an exciting team to watch, Coop. What a difference a year makes. And I think more importantly, like what a difference it is to, that experience. And then it almost feels like this is an Etowah team that kind of picked up where they may have left off like 2 years ago when Mahoney was healthy and Weir was healthy and Strickland was healthy. And, you look at those teams and you're like, what could have been if all those guys would have stayed healthy. And even last year with Exie getting hurt, in the preseason and being out for the year, I think the only benefit, again, we talked about this last year, if you can even say there's a benefit to that, because there's really not a benefit to an injury when you have such a dynamic player like Exie, but you do get Walker Hughes a chance to get snaps. And I think the fact that he was thrust into action due to those injuries makes this transition to a new coaching staff and this season a little bit easier. And I think he's still, like you said, he didn't have to do it all last week. They got some additional productivity at that running back spot. So that just makes them more dynamic. When they come off the bye, they will face the Marietta Blue Devils. A very proud program is Marietta, Coop. And we'll talk about this in a couple weeks. Marietta has Wheeler this week. They are 0-4, and that is an interesting kind of tally. Now, I will say there's a caveat here, at least in my opinion. They played some top teams. They lost to Gainesville, who's a top 3 team in Class 5A. They lost to West Forsyth, who's, I would say, an above average team in 6A. They lost to McEachern by 3 points in a rivalry game, who McEachern is a top 5, top 6 team in 6A. And then they lost to a very strong Hillgrove team last week, 34-6, and Hillgrove is 3-0. So Marietta with a strong strength of schedule. Again, I don't want to give away too much. We'll talk about them and their result from Wheeler next week on the podcast, and also when we preview Etowah. But on the bye week this week are the Eagles, and looking good, looking improved. And when they open region play, I think they're going to be a team that is going to have to be reckoned with one way or the other.
Yeah, I would say so. And I think they're in a position to nick some people, as we would say, where, you have a team like Marietta where you would look at the strength of schedule, you would look at some of those ratings and say, okay, well, Marietta should be favored in this one. I don't think you can just write that in. Again, Etowah's it's a hard team to figure out still, especially since Woodstock beat River Ridge. That really bumps their resume up in our minds, at least in county, I think. But with that being said, I do think that they're going to be able to make some noise in the region. I think some of those teams like the Wheeler, North Paulding, Cherokees of the world are going to have to really focus on the Eagles, and Marietta's right in that group too. So obviously we'll wait and see what happens between Marietta and Wheeler this coming Friday. But at the same time, I feel like Etowah getting the bye week before they jump into the region schedule is a huge benefit for them.
Absolutely, Coop. Time to move on now. The River Ridge Knights, who were playing in our North Georgia Sports Report game of the week. Cooper was a stalemate for most of this ball game. Two defenses really going at it, holding the opposition in check. I think one of the things that we thought might happen, maybe a special teams score, special teams play, did not really pan out in terms of the on the River Ridge side. Woodstock getting a win 14-10. We'll talk about Woodstock's side momentarily. I think the big story from this one is River Ridge's inability to really get anything going on the ground, which has been their bread and butter this week, and I think that kind of stymied their offense. Coop, thoughts on this ball game?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, watching the game, we had talked to Coach Collins last week on the podcast. He'd said that he felt good about going vertical if needed. And I think for Woodstock's credit, they made them go vertical more than they needed to or wanted to. Hunter Lockerman didn't have a bad day, 169 yards, one touchdown, one pick, the one pick being kind of the nail in the coffin at the end there. But to your point, 43 team rush yards. That was all River Ridge had on Friday. It was tough sledding. Now, it was tough sledding on both sides, but the Woodstock defense, really stymied that Knights ground attack, which is what they've done all year. They're ground and pound. They're going to run for over 200 yards as a team, and then they're going to block a kick, block a punt, return something for a touchdown, and that'll be their separation in the turnover margin. And Woodstock, to their credit, there was nothing to be had on special teams. They took care of the ball. Special teams went as planned, and it really was. It was a battle of between the 20s. It was, just kind of watching, like an old game of Pong. You really, boop boop. How about that from a 25-year-old? That's a heck of a reference.
That's
Wow.
crazy. That's crazy.
But with that being said, I think for anybody watching the game, you kind of wish the officials had kept their flag in their pocket just a touch more. There was a whole lot of zebras on the screen, so to speak. But at the end of the day, River Ridge, this is obviously a tough loss for them. Having kind of ridden that high of beating some of these teams that week over week, you and I kind of sat here and said, I don't know whether it was Denmark, Allatoona, or going into this week against Woodstock. And then one last name I did want to shout out. Sam Vincent had a heck of a route to get open for that touchdown that they did score there. So I was very impressed with him in that game. It's just, if you can't run the ball, especially when that's been your identity all season long, and then you pair that with the special teams being clean for the Wolverines, it's just a tough sledding. It's really tough. So for River Ridge, they're going to have to regroup. I think the key to them is to find some offense outside of, just running the ball if they have to. And I think they'll have the opportunity to do that this week against Pope.
Yeah, Coop, they will face a Pope team that is struggling. They are still winless at 0-4. Last week, it was Sprayberry's revenge. We looked at this game a year ago, and Pope got Sprayberry. It was Sprayberry's only blemish on their region ledger last year, and this year, I believe, Coach Formanaya said we will not be losing to Pope, and they made a statement. They're led by, as we talked about it, Hudson Marenko. He's a junior quarterback. Luke McClendon is a leading receiver, and then they all battle with two running backs, and it's really been the ground game that they are looking for. Ethan Alterman did get to go last week, and then Ivan Darden Jr., a freshman, who's really been leading the way for them up to this point of the season. Coop, they're only averaging about 11.5 points per game, so they're really struggling to get the ball in the end zone. And their defense has given up a ton, about almost 40 points at 39.5 points per game. So this is a game I think that River Ridge will be able to take advantage on the ground. You mentioned them only getting about 40, 50 yards rushing last week. They're still averaging about 175 yards a game on the ground, despite the result from last week. 148-ish yards through the air. Lockerman's thrown for 593 yards and 3 touchdowns versus just 1 interception. You mentioned Sam Vincent leads a team in receiving, 15 catches, 190 yards, and a touchdown. Eli Bowden, Arden Redmond, Coach Collins has talked about those guys helping out in the passing game. But I think ultimately it's going to be, as you mentioned, that running game, and can Camden Cox and Micah Pugh, whoever has a hot hand, reestablish that and really get Pope, kind of playing on their heels on that run game. And I think this is a chance for them to do that. I think special teams might be big again. I don't think it'll be any secret, Pope. Those guys will be ready. They should be ready for special teams play. But I think River Ridge comes back and evens out their region record. Both of these teams looking for their first region win. That 0-1 for Pope, the 0-1 for River Ridge. I don't think it's the same 0-1 in region play, although, looking at the standings don't care at the end of the season. But I think that when you get to the end of the season, I think River Ridge is probably going to be um, one of the teams vying for one of those playoff spots. And I don't think Pope is there right now. I think they're a much younger team, much more inexperienced team outside of a guy like Alterman at running back. I just don't see it in the cards. Even River Ridge on the road. I think the only thing is maybe an emotional letdown in a game where River Ridge last week led almost, or at least for the entire second half, led most of that ball game. Are they up and ready to play a Pope team that, if you look at the records, Pope 0-4, River Ridge 3-1, are they looking at that record, or will they battle or be battle tested? And it's not going to be an emotional hangover or letdown. And can they bounce back? I think River Ridge does bounce back, Coop. I don't think this game is close. I think River Ridge by 4 touchdowns, and that's probably taking an under on River Ridge, but that's where I have them this week, 28-point favorite.
Yeah, I think with River Ridge's identity, it's more instead of an emotional letdown, they'll be more angry about it.
Mm.
So, with that being said, we will get some version of joyless murder ball, I would suspect. So, the Cooper Predictor also agrees with that. It has River Ridge winning this game 42-0. I'm going to stand by it and say 42-0 will be a heck of a pick. I'm going to roll with the Knights with a 42-point win there. Again, predicated on the idea that they come out to play angry and they don't come out to play an emotional letdown like last week because they got to right the ship quickly in the region. And kind of like to your point, I kind of mentioned this when I wrote the article reviewing the game. Last thing I wrote was it's going to be a heck of a playoff race because Sequoyah and Sprayberry, one of them is going to have a loss at the end of this week. River Ridge and Woodstock, we know who's got the loss in that one, but Woodstock still got to go play Creekview, Sequoyah, and Sprayberry. River Ridge has everything in front of them as well. It's just we will find out. This is a region that it's just wait and see right now.
It is a lot to determine. I think, Coop, if we can just take a quick intermission before we talk about Woodstock and just talk about this region, games that teams that we feel will be in the mix, maybe not. Let's just talk about for playoff play. You're looking at certainly Sprayberry and Sequoyah that we'll take a look at here momentarily. You mentioned Woodstock, a team we talked about earlier that might be battling for a home playoff game, and I think they have enough talent to challenge what we feel as the top two teams in that region. You got River Ridge, who's hanging around. Again, a 4-point loss. That game could have gone either way last week against Woodstock. So now their margin of victory for River Ridge gets a little bit smaller. And then, you got the Creekview Grizzlies kind of lurking around. And with the win over Lassiter, and time will tell how good Lassiter was, but I think you have to win those ball games. And then you've got Lassiter, Pope, and Riverwood, teams that have all scored some points outside of Pope. It may be Riverwood, so maybe just Lassiter kind of been an explosive team, but you can't take those teams for granted because, as you mentioned, you can't afford a slip up. You saw what happened to Sprayberry last season. They didn't come out to play, had more talent, in my opinion, than Pope, and Pope beat them. And it was, it wasn't like a fluke where somebody just, caught a Hail Mary at the end of a ball game that they happened to be in and held the ball for 37 minutes in time of possession. So got to pack your lunch every week, every day of practice, got to come focused to play. But this region, again, up in the air, we really, I think we know who the top two teams are, but Woodstock will have something to say about that. And you could assume that, it's going to be River Ridge and Woodstock in that 3-4 position, but I think Creekview might have something to say about that. So nothing set in stone right now for this region. A lot to be determined over the next 4, 5, 6 weeks.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think that's the question, right? Is that River Ridge and Creekview, how far apart are they? how much better was River Ridge's out of region schedule than Creekview's, if at all? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what if River Ridge had gone to Calhoun and played, and gone to North Forsyth and played, and then hosted Cambridge? Like, how does that actually play out on the field? So obviously, the old saying, here we go again. I fit it in every week this time, so we're going to keep going it. But if ifs and buts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. Kind of the same thing. If we as commentators could have that game that we could see in private, then we would have the answers to this stuff, but we don't. So I feel like River Ridge, Creekview, and Woodstock are kind of in a group,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have Sequoyah and Sprayberry. But here's the thing about Sprayberry: I'm still not bought in on the Yellow Jackets yet, because I don't think they've beat anybody that's particularly as impressive as Sequoiah's wins. Sprayberry's schedule doesn't, I don't see a Kell on there. I don't see anybody that they've smoked. I don't see a 61-point win against a top classification team. So with that being said, I feel like you got to give the edge to Sequoyah. Now we sat here and said this last year too. I fully understand that, got to learn from history a little bit, but I still feel like that where does Sprayberry fit into that? How far is the gap? So those gaps are big questions, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if we see a Riverwood or a Lassiter. Pope, I think maybe the worst out of all of them, but Riverwood and Lassiter, I wouldn't be surprised if they nick a team somewhere and catch a Sprayberry, catch a Creekview, catch a Woodstock off guard one week, and then boom, next thing you know, we got a unexpected loss, and we're back sitting here like we were last year with Sprayberry losing to Pope, and we had no idea what to do with that either. So it's a heck of a playoff race. I mean, it should be a lot of fun as we get down the stretch. And of course, we love it having 4 county teams in it, that we get these rivalry games that rotate in and out, but you also get these big time matchups as well.
Absolutely, Coop. Speaking of matchups, let's get back to it. Woodstock Wolverines, the winner of our game of the week last week. We talked about it. Xavier Murphy goes 80 yards for the game winner with about a minute and a half left, sealed by an interception. Woodstock wins that ball game over River Ridge at is it the Woodshed, the Den? I can't remember what they call the Wood.
The Woodshed.
The Woodshed. Okay, 14-10. The Wolverines defeat the Knights, the first time in 5 tries that they get that victory. Congratulations to the Woodstock Wolverines. And again, I think more importantly, Coop, not necessarily the getting off the snide. They moved to 1-0 in the region, and kind of to what we just said, sit themselves pretty good early on to qualify for one of those top 4 positions. Thoughts on that ball game from the Woodstock perspective, Coop?
Yeah, mental toughness comes to mind. That's the thing that I noticed throughout the game, because there's so many times that you would have seen Woodstock not stand up to the challenge that River Ridge was throwing at them. And River Ridge is a high pressure team to play. Special teams got to be perfect. They're going to run the ball. You got to be hard nosed on the line and in the linebacking core. They're going to take it to you. Woodstock was up to the task the entire night. There were plenty of punts. They handled it beautifully. Point after attempts, there were no issues. I felt like Woodstock did what they needed to do to win. Now, that's mostly thanks to some of the efforts late in the game. Again, you mentioned Xavier Murphy, ended the game with 3 grabs, 42 yards, and that big touchdown with the yards after catch on the screenplay. Burmeister, 14-23 for 147 yards. Not the most efficient night in the world, but a touchdown and an interception, we can live with it. And then the big thing was, the difference was his legs. 23 carries, 103 yards, and a touchdown. And Woodstock went to their bag of tricks, opening up some things with the back pass. Rylan Hubbard then throws it back to Burmeister, who takes it in. So he's got a receiving touchdown stat on the year as well. But that's what good teams do. They find a way to win. River Ridge, again, is a high pressure team. They frustrate teams, and then they end up making mistakes that the Knights take advantage of. That did not happen in this game. Woodstock, to me, showed great strength in what they did. For me, it's kind of like that hurdle, right? They beat Etowah a couple years ago. It was like, that's a hurdle that they had to clear. And then they ended up making the playoffs last year as well, which is another hurdle. Here we go again. Now they beat River Ridge, who they hadn't beaten in the last 5 times they played them. So here they are again, back in the fold, right? Back in this conversation. So I feel like where Woodstock's at, again, we sit here and we say they lost by a touchdown in overtime to Etowah to start the season. What do we do with that? They didn't look as impressive as they had last year when they played North Spring or when they played Woodland Cartersville, but they beat River Ridge, who I think again, they were ranked top 10 last week, according to the Georgia High School Football Daily. So I feel like Woodstock's in a good position. I want to see it continue. This is a trap game this week against Lassiter. This is a trap game because it would be very easy to say, we did that. Now we're looking ahead to some of these other teams that we've got coming down the road because we're no longer talking about, if we make the playoff. We're now talking about where we want to be seated. Can't do that. Don't do that. I think this is a game where Woodstock really has to prepare well this week because Lassiter is not just a pushover team. You saw what they were able to do to Creekview. Now Creekview won that football game, but they're able to put up points. And I think for Woodstock, if they end up getting lulled to sleep by this Lassiter team, that could be a big problem. So definitely keeping my eyes on the Wolverines this week. Not calling for the upset, but calling for maybe a closer game than a lot of people think.
Coop, if I can borrow a line from my kids and how the kids say, stop the cap, Coop. This is not a trap game. Lassiter, a team that the only thing that's close in this ball game right now is the overall records of both of these teams. Lassiter 3-1, Woodstock 3-1. I know the strength of schedule argument probably doesn't hold up as much in these two games as it did with Lassiter last week and Creekview last week. But I think Woodstock is a proven team. They're a proven commodity. They've proven they can put points on the board. They do it in a couple of different ways. We talked about Xavier Murphy. He was coming along as a running back, and then it was, the crafty lefty, Burmeister. He's, completing 60% of his passes. Completed 60% of his passes last week. He's thrown for 785 yards, rushed for 359 yards, accounted for 11 touchdowns. I don't know if Lassiter has seen a quarterback to date like Burmeister, and I think that this is a team that is, in my opinion, laser focused. I think their letdown game already happened in terms of trap game, which was Woodland Cartersville against the emotional loss to Etowah. I don't think they have another one in them. I don't think they're looking ahead. I think Coach Devine has his team focused, and I think this is going to be another big win. It was a 34-point win a year ago. I think Lassiter is a little bit better than a year ago. Woodstock might not be as explosive offensively as they were a year ago, but I think defensively they're better. I think the Wolverines really take this road trip and take their defense with them. It travels this week. I like the Wood by 28 this week, Coop. No question, no trap. They take care of business on the road.
All right. Well, the Cooper Predictor is a little bit more in line. So it's got a Woodstock win on this one, 41-28. So that puts you at a 13-point win for the Wolverines. I'm going to stick with that number, man. I think that might be it. I think it might be that Lassiter gets out to an early lead. Again, I know you're saying I'm crazy for this. I know you're saying I'm crazy, but it's a road game. I don't know. I don't know. So I'm keeping that open. So I'll be glad to come here and eat crow if I'm wrong next week. But that's what I've got. I think that number's probably right. I'll give it 41-28 for Woodstock. I think that you don't want to compare week to week, but I think if you look at their records overall, you can kind of tell what, kind of to your point. Yes, Woodstock played Woodland, Cartersville, and North Springs, who aren't world beaters, but they also lost to Etowah in overtime and then beat Riverwood this past week. So I think the record's pretty good. So I'll go with the Wolverines again. I think a 13-point win, 41-28, as the Cooper Predictor puts it.
Yeah, I think 35-7 that's my 28 points this week.
I got that defense. A lot of trust in that Woodstock defense.
I do. What they were able to do to stop the run, I think they can find a way to stop the pass this week and get the job done and move to 2-0. And maybe creep up in my power rankings, but that remains to be seen.
Yeah, we'll see that in just a minute.
Coop, let's move on. We've recapped all 5 games from last week. We've got one more. The Sequoyah Chiefs. Goes without saying, have been the most dominant team in the county the last few seasons. This season, last week they go over, beat Riverwood, shut them out, get their work done. No issue, at least from the score. They get out early and they never look back. No issue in kind of being motivated to play this ball game. They have another tough one coming up, but before before we get there, Chiefs do get their second shot out of the season. Your thoughts on the victory over the Riverwood Raiders last week?
Sequoyah doing what Sequoyah does. Colby Martin threw 7 passes for 7 completions, 113 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jack Ripley, again, continues to be a name that we kind of look back on and say, how did we miss this at the start of the season? But 4 grabs, 91 yards, 2 touchdowns for him. I believe he also had a passing touchdown as well. So look, and then, Will Rajecki, it's kind of at the point where you almost yawn at this, but 16 carries, 157 yards, 2 touchdowns. Okay. Yeah. What else is new? It's Will Rajecki, but you actually have to appreciate that, right? Like you actually, sometimes I have to remind myself to stop and say, yeah, okay, that's not normal that this guy's average. I don't know what he's averaging, but it's got to be close to 150 yards per game, if not more than that. So again, earned the nickname of Mr. Touchdown in my book. So, they're a heck of a ball club. They are. I mean, again, you mentioned it, second shutout, resounding win, wasn't ever in question. They were up 42-0 at the end of the half, I do believe. It really speaks volumes kind of about their depth that they've shut out 2 teams when they pulled the starters after the first half. That's a heck of a thing to know that your second string is able to shut out some varsity level competition. But they look really good. That's all you can say. Again, I wish we knew where to put the praise more than where we already have, but there's not a lot of critiquing to be done since they handled business. I mean, again, the only critiquing thing that we could say was against Denmark when they were kind of sleepwalking for the first half. But since then, they've been all lights out, and I don't expect that'll be any different this week.
Wow. So let's go ahead and talk about their opponent this week. And actually, Coop, I apologize. I'm jumping the gun. I just looked at my phone, just got a text from Coach Teter. He's ready for us to talk to him. Let's go ahead and get his thoughts on his team's performance last week. And then certainly we'll ask him about his opponent this week, as we have a top 10 battle in Class 5A coming up.
And joining us now on the North Georgia Sports Report podcast, the head coach for the Sequoyah Chiefs, Coach James Teter. Coach, thank you for being back with us.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to be with y'all.
Absolutely, Coach. We always look forward to it, especially coming off of a great week that you had last week against Riverwood, 56-0 win against Riverwood. Tell us a little bit about that. And, we even haven't had a chance to talk to you since the Kell win, which was obviously a big experience as well for us as commentators of it. But tell us what you've seen over your team over the last couple of weeks as they've opened up region play this last Friday.
I think we continue to improve. I think we get better every week. Obviously, there's still going to be some things we've got to work on and get better at, but for the most part, we're pleased where we're at. I think defensively we can continue to grow and get better. But all in all, we're really happy with what we're doing.
Coach, we're not going to let it go. Your 100th win at Sequoyah, your 200th win overall as a head coach. That includes stops at Clay High in Green Cove Springs, Florida, Dunwoody High School, and of course Sequoyah. We don't want to leave. We don't want to not mention that. And we know you're more about this team, Coach. But again, we've asked you before about your career. Was this win any more special or different than any of the other previous 199?
Probably the same answer I've been giving you. No, it's was it special? Yeah. I mean, they did some stuff after it was different, but again, I had a news reporter ask the same thing the other night. At the end of the season, we'll probably look at it and kind of think a little bit more about it, but we just haven't really had time to sit back and reflect on some of that stuff yet. Because you got Sprayberry down the road, which just there's no time to sit back and dwell on any of that stuff. It's good. It's been great, but just really worried about what Sprayberry is going to have going on.
Coach, I wanted to ask about something we talked to you in the Kell game, and we saw it firsthand. Was you mentioned that time of possession was going to be a big factor in that game, and you guys kind of switched the whole identity a little bit and went back to I formation. Kind of looked like Sequoyah of old a little bit. Is that something that you feel comfortable doing against most teams, or is that something that you feel like week to week, depending on the opponent, it kind of calls for that? Because last week, against Riverwood, Colby Martin perfect completion percentage. So you obviously can do it both ways. But how does that go as a coaching staff? Is that something that you address early in the week?
Yeah, we address it on Sundays. I think we feel like we can do it at any time we need to. I mean, we spend a lot of time with Colby and the other quarterbacks practicing under center just to make sure we can get snaps and things. Um, just it really depends on who we play and what we feel we have to do offensively to help Brent defensively. You know, the Kell game was totally different, that we just felt like we had to find a way to keep their athletes off the field and keep their offense on the sideline. And so for us to be able to eat up clock, it was, ground and pound a little bit. And sometimes we feel like putting an extra lineman in, taking the wideouts out, we can do that because it just makes people have to switch their defense up a little bit or do some things they're not used to. And some people are used to playing position or out of position because they got to either shift their line down or whatever. So it just kind of gives us an advantage in that point. But we feel like it just is dictated by who we're playing and how much we're going to do that.
Coach, one of the things we talked about in your week 1 victory is focus, and you guys, we talked to you before and after the Cherokee game, and you talked about how refocused your team was. A team like Riverwood, who's had some struggles recently, it didn't seem like you had an issue getting your team focused, and you guys weren't looking ahead, as you mentioned, to your next opponent, Sprayberry. What was that week of preparation like last week, getting ready for Riverwood, a team that, by all intents and purposes, you guys, just in terms of talent level, are better across the board?
We talked about this the last time with you all, and I kind of used you all as my example to the team the other day when they were talking, or we were talking to them about kind of what makes me more nervous. The Riverwoods probably make me more nervous than some of the other people just because of that lack of focus. Can we say that every day at practice everybody was locked in? Probably not. But we did a good job of keeping them humble as coaches, every day reminding them of what was at stake and what was, Riverwoods, even though they had played some teams that might not be as good as some of the people we had played, they had played well in some spots. This time of year, everybody's got some people banged up and injured, and they were kind of the same when we sit down with their staff and talk to them after the game a little bit. But it's not easy keeping the kids focused on that. But that's kind of what I was telling you all that night, that what worried me more was kids who don't have a reputation of being winning every week. And sometimes our kids in the past haven't been able to handle it. I think our senior class does a good job of keeping kids locked in. I thought for the most part, any day we were kind of slipping a little bit, the seniors kind of got people back in focus and got them in line. And then they did a really good job of just what we talked to them a lot about Friday at dinner was just going out and take care of their business, doing what they're supposed to. Because if you're expected to win and expected to do the things that we're kind of expected to do, then you go out and you take care of business. You don't fool around with a team like that and let them stay in close and get it in the fourth quarter.
Well, Coach, this week you have a team that you probably won't have to motivate your guys very much. There's Sprayberry coming up this week, obviously a heck of a program, and have done very well against Cherokee County, unfortunately, for the past few years. What kind of challenges do the Yellow Jackets present, and any keys that you're looking at for your team to prepare for this week on Friday?
They're very similar to Kell. They do a lot of the same things. Offense is a little bit different. It's a little bit closer to kind of what we do in some things. But as far as athlete per athlete and where they have them, at quarterback, at running back, at wideout, in the secondary, there's a lot of similarities to Kell. And so for us, it's kind of a little bit of the same thought processes to find a way to stay on the field, eat up that clock, and keep them off the field. Everybody knows last year when they got us last year, the quarterback really hurt us a lot just with his scrambling abilities, and he's kind of the same. So we've got to do some things just based on last year to kind of take care of that. And then offensively, we've got to find some ways to put it in the end zone. We didn't do a great job of that last year. So we've kind of done some wrinkles. There's some things we haven't shown and some things that we've hid for a while that we may have to do. But I think our kids will be up for the challenge. I mean, they're excited. And, yeah, there's no big motivational speeches needed this week. They kind of know what's at stake.
Coach, I don't want to put too much on this, but I think historically speaking, we think these are the two best teams in the region, and this game will certainly go a long way. I won't call it a region title game because we don't really have that, but it will go a long way in determining the region champion. I want to get back to their quarterback, Jaden Duckett. you said he's elusive, hard to tackle. We've seen him, Coop, you and I've seen him a few times now. Is there any way to emulate bringing him to the ground in practice, or how do you handle that as you prep for a very elusive, not just throw runner, but I think one of the things that's special about him, I feel like he scrambles to pass, not scrambles to necessarily run. But how do you mimic that in practice, or is there a way to do that?
There's not really, because we don't have anybody in our team that's quite like him. Colby does some scout rep for us this week, and we can't do too much because we can't kind of bang on him too much, but he does the best he can. He doesn't compare in size with that kid. He's a little bit bigger, but I don't think you can. You just have to do the best you can with your scouts and understand, and you're really trying to make sure everybody's in the right fit where they're supposed to be, and just making sure they're in the right area and get the kids to understand that, if he does scramble, we just got to find a way to hem him in. And then the problem you have is, like you said, he likes to scramble and throw it. So if your secondary falls asleep and decides they're going to try to come up and make the tackle, then you leave somebody wide open. So you're kind of a double-edged sword there. But you just got to do your best to kind of keep him moving and try to slow him down a little bit. But it's not an easy job. So I don't envy Brent a lot this week. So
hey, look, last time you put Brent up to the challenge, he held Kel to 6 points. So for the sake of Cherokee County and the Sequoyah Chiefs, we're rooting for you guys hard for another defensive near shutout this weekend.
He'll appreciate that a little bit.
Well, you guys host the Yellow Jackets at Skip Pope, a battle of by all intents and purposes region favorites for the championship, a battle of two top 10 teams in the state. Should be an exciting atmosphere out at Skip Pope. And Coach, we wish you the best of luck. And as always, we thank you for joining us again here on the North Georgia Sports Report. Go get them this week.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everything y'all do. Go Chiefs.
And again, thank you to Coach Teter for being back with us on the podcast. Always great to talk to Coach Teter. And what did we say, man? Kind of, you and I talked off air before we started, but kind of the same story we thought maybe against that Kel team, since Sprayberry and Kel seem kind of similar in the talent department, which is what Coach Teter was telling us there.
He did allude to that. This is a team that's similar, got a great quarterback, a talented running back, big receivers, good secondary, all the things that you don't want to look at. You don't want to have to game plan for if you're Coach Jack Mine and certainly Coach Buddy on the defensive side. Coop, we talked about the wins with Coach Teter. And before we even get into this game, I feel like you mentioned this before we went to the interview when you talked about Will Rejecki and your comment of Mr. Touchdown. It's almost like we get to a point where we take this team for granted, when we say things like Sequoyah doing what Sequoyah does. But I think if you're can kind of just capture the moment. And I feel like maybe it's tough to do when you're in the middle, especially if you're on that staff of this run they've been on over the last few years. But I think as fans, I don't know if we really appreciate what Coach Teter's been able to do in his longevity. And I know a lot of times people don't get their roses until they're into their career, but I don't know how much he plans on coaching. But I just think, for the amount, the time he spent at Sequoyah, the success he's had to get to that 100-win mark, 200 wins in a career, it's something that we haven't seen in our county. And I think that, man, that should probably be appreciated a little bit more. And I hope the fans in Hickory Flat and I hope the fans of high school football in Cherokee County really kind of understand what Coach Teter has done over at Sequoyah. And even when his team comes to play your team and as good as they are right now, and it's probably tough to cheer against them, I think one thing that you might be able to do is just appreciate the success he's had and the run that team is on. And it's just been fantastic. Okay, enough about that. All right, let's talk about their opponent this week, because I know Coach Teter does not, he alluded, look, maybe when the season's over, we'll look back and talk about, the milestone victories. But Coop, they've got a big opponent, and we talked about it a little bit in kind of our intermission talk about their region play. Sprayberry's coming in here. They get revenge on Pope. They win that game 40-0. Jaden Duckett, he's thrown for 628 yards, 11 touchdowns, has not thrown a pick all season. I almost think these two teams mirror each other a little bit in terms of talent across the board. Duckett also leads a team in rushing. He's got 310 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their averaging Sprayberry is 261.3 yards per game on the ground. They've got a couple of running backs they'll go to outside of Duckett, Drew Keeling and Ian Holbert. They've combined for 352 yards and 6 touchdowns as a complement Jaden Duckett in the backfield. We've talked about receivers in the past for Sprayberry. They double as their secondary, guys like Jordan Edmonds, Kobe Lewis, leading the way for them. Keelan Jones, also a receiver we'll talk about. We mentioned these names. Edmonds headed to Georgia. Edmonds headed to Alabama. Keelan Jones headed to Georgia, and Kobe Lewis, who sports 6 D1 offers currently. This is a team at the skill position in the secondary and at receiver that can really punish you with their athleticism and skill. So it's going to be a very interesting matchup. We know what Sequoyah brings to the table. We kind of Coach Teter kind of alluded to that in his comments about maybe controlling the line of scrimmage, controlling the ground game, kind of helping his defense out by keeping Sprayberry's offense off the field. Coop, I probably went over every point you wanted to make. I apologize. It's your turn.
Well, I got keys to the game here that I'll.
Okay.
Yeah. You kind of stole some of my thunder there, but I'll go ahead and default to my keys of the game to save me here. Number one, Sequoiah's receivers have to get open at some point. You mentioned, guys like Jordan Edmonds. As an Alabama fan, super excited to have him in Tuscaloosa. As a fan of Cherokee County, I wish he was already there because don't need to see him on Fridays for the region, but so be it. Sequoiah's got to get somebody open at some point. I don't think they're going to be able to win this game not passing the ball. So the question is it Jack Ripley? Is it Brooks Darling? Who can get open for them? But I think somebody's going to have to. Number two is limit Duckett, which is so much easier to say than be done. I mean, this guy is unbelievable. Again, you and I have seen him firsthand run all over a ton of defenses from Cherokee County and beyond. Very frustrating to watch if you're an opposing fan. If you are a fan of Sprayberry, he's a heck of a ball player, and rightfully so. And then, the keys to the game, I did write these before our interview with Coach Teter, but as he kind of mentioned, time of possession is going to be huge. The best thing you can do is frustrate them. I really, really, in my heart of hearts, I do feel like if Sequoyah is able to establish that run game, then Sprayberry is going to be in a lot of trouble because their talent is so outside. They don't have that big name defensive lineman. They don't have that big name offensive lineman. So if that Sequoyah front four can get some push on the defensive side of the ball, if that, offensive line can get some movement going, then I feel like they can really dominate this game because the line of scrimmages weren't great. And then instead of telling your corners and your receivers, hey, you guys got 3 seconds to get open or you got to cover for, 5 seconds, it flips, right? You got 5 seconds to get open and you only got to cover for 3. So I feel like that's going to be kind of a key to this game. Pressure on Duckett, keeping pass lane integrity. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, when you're rushing the passer on a passing play, your job is to follow the lane. So don't get pushed outside because then Duckett's just going to run in the vacated space. So everyone kind of has to maintain their lane is what it's called. But pass rush integrity is going to be a big key to this one. I that's really all I can say. I think it's going to be, we hope for kind of a repeat of Kel versus Sequoyah. We would love to see a result like that. I don't know if it'll be the exact same. I do feel like Sprayberry's a little bit more put together than Kel has been, especially after last week. But all of that being said, Cooper Predictor puts Sequoyah as a 24-point win. They got this one going 38-14. I don't know about all that. I do think Sequoyah edges this one out, but personally, I'll put it at about 3.
Coop, the Cooper Predictor, putting you on the spot here, and it's a bold number. You mentioned the kind of the most of the names of playmakers that we feel for Sprayberry are in the secondary. Up front, it's really Adonis Vickerstaff, who's got 23 total tackles and 2 sacks along the defensive line. And then they've got a trio of linebackers who've been pretty good, but they're going to have to be great this week. Rashawn Backman, Isaac Da Silva, and then Seiki Minifield. Those 3 players all with a couple of sacks and all leading the team in total tackles. So they'll be getting downfield, but they're going to have to, their work will be cut out for them as well, getting Will Rajecki on the ground. And again, can they figure out a way to slow down that scheme of Sequoyah? maybe one of the X factors. I don't know. Coach Fulminaya never played against the Chiefs, at least not this version of the Chiefs. So it's not like you have Coach Vavra over there. Certainly, it hasn't stopped or slowed Sprayberry down so far this season. They're undefeated, averaging 46.7 points a game, allowing 11 points a game. So it doesn't seem like there has been a whole lot of fall off. They have a great secondary, so we'll see how Sequoyah can pick that apart. But we saw a Sequoyah team a year ago against a really good secondary in Gainesville, really kind of pick them off and pick them apart in the first round of the playoffs against a team that had or at least seemed to have more Division I college level prospects on their roster than Sequoyah at the time. But the coaching staff at Sequoyah came up with a fantastic game plan. I think the ultimate key, like you mentioned, is can they get Jaden Duckett on the ground? And if they can get him on the ground, I think it'll be a long night. Coop, I've been going back and forth on this one in terms of a result. My initial thought was Sprayberry because it's hard for me to go against Jaden Duckett because of what I've seen of him. But I think this time is a charm for Coach Buddy. I'm kind of with you. I like the Chiefs I'm not gonna mimic your pick, but I'm gonna call it 7. I like the Chiefs by a touchdown. I think they get a big play. I think defensively for Sequoyah, I think the big play comes from Drew Williams, their up and coming star at linebacker. I think he's able to get Duckett to the ground. We'll see if that's true or false here, but I think Sequoyah wins by 7, takes control of the region. And I know that we're early and we talked to Coach Teter about this, but in my opinion, this is de facto region title game. And the winner of this game, and if they don't win the region, they certainly have an inside track on the region play. They'll be one game up on the next best team, in our opinion, in the region, and have that game behind them. So my thoughts, Chiefs by 7. I know that the student body at Sequoyah will say Chiefs by 90. Don't think that'll be the case this week, but I think it'll be a fantastic ball game on Friday night in Hickory Flat.
Yeah, one last thought on that is that
Sure.
it's not that Sequoyah doesn't have as much college talent as Sprayberry does. It's that it's in different positions. Again, Sequoyah with 2 offensive linemen that are headed to, FBS football programs, Alex Brewer and Brody Craig. Again, Will Rajecki at running back headed to Memphis. It's not that they're less talented. I think they're maybe, if they are less talented, it ain't by much. But I think it's in different ways. Again, Sequoyah is built for the running game, and they pass the ball off of the running game. Sprayberry's kind of the opposite. It's Jaden Duckett just kind of improvising back there, trying to do some Johnny Manziel-esque things. And if he can, he can. If he can, he can't. So I think that's going to be the key to this game. Again, I like where you're at with that pick. Case and Gant's going to be a big deal. Drew Williams, you mentioned him having a big factor. So I don't know that Sprayberry is head and shoulders more talented than Sequoyah. I really don't feel that way. I think it's just in different ways. And to copy a famous quote that I always love that you use a ton is styles make fights. And I feel like that's going to be very much the same this week. And it's going to be who can limit what the other team does as much as possible. So it's a super intriguing matchup. And there's so much writing on this. As you mentioned, you would think the winner is going to be your region champ, but obviously a lot of football after to be played, but just in terms of favorites, that certainly looks the case.
Certainly does, Coop. Ought to be a good one, as we mentioned. Man, I thank you to Coach Teter and of course, Coach Williams for joining us earlier in the podcast as we wrap up our previews for Week 5. Coop, Week 5, it's not necessarily halfway through the season. We know there are 12 weeks at least 12 weeks that the season runs. There are 2 bye weeks in there, but for all intents and purposes, for the county teams that are playing this week, this will be the halfway point of the season when this game is over on Friday night. So it's hard to believe that we're already at that halfway mark here. It just seems like we just started a couple of weeks ago, but we've played a lot of football. We've had a chance to really evaluate these teams, and that leads us into our top 6 or our ratings or rankings or whatever vernacular you want to use here for the teams in the county. We'll start at the bottom and go to the top as we always do. Coop, I'm going to be a chicken and let you go first this week to see where you start in your top 6.
Yeah, number 6 for me is gonna be Creekview once again. I do feel like it was great to get to see that win, but I felt like I still feel like Cherokee may be a step ahead, not only beating Pope, but also then this week competing against a tough Lambert team, so, Creekview is gonna be my 6th seed, right now. Again, continue to win football games, and you will inevitably move up.
Yeah, we won't see Creekview face a county team, I believe, until next week. They have Woodstock um, uh, and then certainly they'll have Woodstock, River Ridge, Sequoyah in the county. So we'll even get a better idea of how they fare against county teams. I'm going to agree with you, Coop. I've got Creekview at number 6. Good win. Gets all of our county teams off the schneid. Everybody's got a game we love to see. Those are things we love to see. And of course, for Creekview, a big win at 1-0 in the region. Coop, I'll take number 5. I'll go first. I've got Cherokee. I know it was a tough loss, a 10-point loss, but again, the Warriors showing they can put up some points. I think right now that might be the difference. They've been a little more consistent in scoring than Creekview, and that's why I have them ranked above the Grizzlies right now. But they are my number 5 team this week.
Yeah, very much agree with you there. Cherokee will also be my number 5. Again, for the exact reasons you pointed out. I feel like if they lined up and played tomorrow, Cherokee would be able to score more than Creekview could keep up with. So I do tend to go towards the Warriors at my number 5. And then
All right.
number 4,
Yeah, this is where we deviate, I'm sure.
I think it probably is. Drum roll, please. As has been number 4 for pretty much the whole season, except after week number 1, it is still the Etowah Eagles. They did beat Chapel Hill. So would the other 3 teams above them, including them. So I didn't really see much to make me feel any different about them, and certainly the competition that happened above them didn't give me any sway one way or the other.
All right, I've got the River Ridge Knights at number 4. I'm going to be the bane of Night Nation again. I've got them dropped. Coop, I've got them going all over the board here this week. I think they were number 2 for me last week. Back down to number 4 this week after a loss to Woodstock. Man, that's how I feel about it. 14-10. Kind of tough love for the Night Nation, but I think they'll bounce back. But right now, number 4. Behind, well, we'll talk about who they're behind here in a minute. I think it's my turn to go at number 3, if I'm not mistaken. So I've got the Woodstock Wolverines. They're the team that beat River Ridge head to head. So at least this week, I've got them ranked a little bit higher. Again, we mentioned it before, 14-10 victory. And that's why I have Woodstock at number 3 this week.
Yeah, River Ridge is going to be my number 3. Obviously, they're going to flip with Woodstock after the head-to-head victory. And the reason I say that is let me clarify my reason for this, because everybody in the comments is already yelling about how much I hate Etowah. So let me just clarify why I don't. First of all, the reason that Etowah is below Woodstock continues to be that I believe if they played again, Woodstock would have won the game. It was Etowah's first game under Coach Vavra with the new system. I don't think they were expecting it. If River Ridge and Woodstock played again, I still think Woodstock would win again. They handled themselves cleanly. They took care of the ball on special teams. I think that's the difference for River Ridge. So yeah, River Ridge is going to be at 3 because I do believe if they lined up, played again on Friday, maybe River Ridge wins 4 out of the 10, but I think Woodstock wins 6 out of the 10.
Cool. Let me take you to task real quick, and we won't experience this until Halloween when Woodstock faces Sprayberry. And I know this is probably kind of a trick question and kind of a gimmicky question. The result of that, we're looking ahead 6 weeks or whatever, but the result of that Sprayberry Woodstock game, let's say Sprayberry beats Woodstock by the same margin that Sprayberry beat Etowah. Does that change your opinion? And again, I know we're looking in the future and so many other things will have happened by then, but would that change your opinion of how you feel if those 2 teams lined up again? Because I think you have been adamant about, you firmly believe Woodstock, if they lined up again, Woodstock would beat Etowah. And I'm not, there's no harm in that opinion. I think that's a fair, you have your rationale, and I think that's all fair. If the question is if Sprayberry beats Woodstock by the same margin they beat Etowah, does that change your opinion on what you think of Etowah in that game, in game 1, which you can't really go back and play based on what we know now?
So no, for two reasons. My first reason is I don't ever take one Friday and apply it to the next. I think
Mhm.
that's something that if you do as a fan, you'll end up confused about what happens. Again, we kind of alluded to it, but Denmark handled Cambridge, which now, if you use the transitive property, you can kind of draw all sorts of conclusions about that, about how much better Riverridge and Sequoyah are than Cherokee or Creekview, excuse me, which I don't think you can do. I don't think that's fair. It's Friday to Friday. Each matchup is its own thing. With that being said, the reason I have for second on that is again, no, because Etowah, my whole reason that Etowah cannot jump Woodstock is because that was an emotional game where it was a rivalry game and they beat them. And it was the first game of the season when Woodstock had no tape on what they were doing. They had no idea, no way to scout it. Sprayberry was game number 2, and they ended up playing them, and it just happens to be Coach Vavra's last team. So the emotions are running high again. So you can't view it in a vacuum anyway. But if you did, it would have the emotion attached to it. So no, I don't think it does anything to move my opinion on that. I mean, for me, Etowah, if you want to move up in my ranking, there's a serious dichotomy here. To me, they beat Woodstock in overtime, which basically means the teams are even, essentially. And then you beat Chapel Hill. Okay, well, Woodstock's resume is beating 2 teams in North Springs and Woodland Cartersville, I understand, but they just beat Riverridge, who was ranked top 10 in 5A according to, some state publications. So
They
the
were wrong.
records
Those publications
themselves.
were wrong, though. I mean, let's
Well,
be honest.
I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing that. They do it, I don't. I keep my hands out of that. I get in enough trouble with the predictor in my own mouth. But what I am saying is that I don't feel like I don't hear any logical rationale for why anyone can say that Etowah would be consistently better than Woodstock, other than, well, they just beat them once. Which, okay, yeah, great, but I just don't see how that plays in. And again, I think Riverridge and Woodstock's a prime example of that. The reason that Woodstock can jump Riverridge is because in that game, it's a rivalry game, yes, but Riverridge's success was predicated on the special teams and running the football. Woodstock denied them of both. They won the game. I don't think that would change again. I think they would go back into the prep week and say, okay, we're going to do max protect punts again. Okay, we're going to load the box again. So I just feel like Woodstock was at a disadvantage week 1. They didn't get to prep it, so that's why it's still that way. But Etowah, look, win football games. Who cares what I say? Go beat Marietta next week and I'll move you up.
Coop, they did win a football game the first week of the season, and they beat your number 2 team, and so that makes them my number 2 team. I'm still going with that. I've moved Etowah back up. I know it's my power ranking has been topsy turvy. I don't care. I'm looking at it week to week, and I've got Etowah's number 2 team. They beat Woodstock. Woodstock beat Riverridge. Right now, they've kind of, Etowah did not play Riverridge in the regular season. I think certainly, I think your point is valid that they did not have any tape. I also think it doesn't matter. You still have to go out and play the game, whether or not you've seen seen the film or not. The overtime, I think those 2 teams are close. When I say 2 and 3, I'm not sitting here saying Etowah's 37 points better than Woodstock, because I think those teams are neck and neck in my opinion, and that's my rationale for having Etowah ranked at number 2 this week. And we'll continue to disagree with this, and Eagle Nation will continue to be um, fired up and frustrated. And Coop, I mean, let me just tell you, it takes a lot for me to say nice things about the Etowah Eagles. And I say this because we have to compete against them in basketball. I coach over there at Cherokee, right? And this is a rival, at least on the hardwood. And so if I'm saying nice things about Etowah, like I am all in on what I'm saying, because it for rivals, for me, I'm kind of a diehard, my team against the world against the world here, and so I'm convicted by what I say about this Etowah football team, and I say those things kind of tongue in cheek, but like you said, they keep winning. I'm sure the predictor will have them ranked at a certain level, and they'll keep moving up. And certainly, if nothing else, we're giving the people something to talk about, Coop. So I appreciate you being a man of conviction and standing by your rankings and ratings this week.
Hey, I do have the Cooper Predictor ratings available if you would like to hear
Hey,
those.
so, so,
Since we
so
didn't publish it though, number one is Sequoyah for me.
yeah, sure, yeah, and let's finish out our rankings, but let's talk about your ratings here for the Cooper Predictor. Maybe out of my rankings, your rankings, this might be the most controversial segment of our podcast this week.
Yeah. And look, the only thing I can tell you is there's a lot of numbers that go into it. I'm not going to give you the math breakdown on how much teams moved, but the rankings are largely unchanged from last week. So everybody do with this information what you will. The Cooper Predictor does not care about your mean comments. It does not care about how you feel. It doesn't care about your favorite color. It doesn't care about what town you live in. It cares about what you do on the field. This is purely reflective. It is reflective of your resume to this point. With that being said, number 6 is Cherokee. Woodstock is 5th. Yes, after losing to River Ridge, they did not, or beating River Ridge, they did not move. As a matter of fact, according to the Cooper Predictor, they're a couple points less impressive than they were before. I don't know what to tell you. Number 4 is Creekview, and then River Ridge is number 3. River Ridge gained a point in the Predictor this past week by losing by 4 points to Woodstock, the 5th-ranked team. Do with that information what you will. Number 2 continues to be Etowah, backing your point, Art. They are a large margin. They'd be a 5.5-point favorite over River Ridge if they played. And then far and away, compared to no one, is Sequoyah, who dropped 22 points after a 56-0 win over Riverwood, but still maintaining a sizable lead. They would be a 23-point favorite over Etowah. They are number 1. One thing I do want to mention, since it is reflective and based on resume, it does look at previous opponents. So if a previous opponent struggles or played you closer than they've played other teams, it will reflect that if you wonder why your team went up and down.
Coop, a couple more things I want to get to before we sign off for the evening. We alluded to this earlier in a ball game, and we talked a little bit about strength of schedule. But an interesting result, and I didn't like do a whole lot of research on this other than look at the score and thought, oh my, Denmark really handling Cambridge, a Cambridge team that was undefeated, looked like it might be competing, maybe for a region title. They've got a game upcoming with, I believe, Calhoun, a Class 3A team. I had Cambridge ranked in the top 10 in Class 4A. They struggle with Denmark, and Denmark is a confusing team to us because River Ridge handled them. Sequoyah struggled with them. Creekview struggled, with Cambridge. Was there anything else in North Georgia that shocked you last week? I'm putting you on the spot here before we turn to our Texas segment.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of to your point, we were texting back and forth, and I just came across the Denmark Cambridge game as I'm doing the math required for the predictor, and that was the one that shocked me the most, just because going into that game, I don't think anybody had that pegged. That was one, and then did Kel beat Wheeler? Is that what I saw?
They
Or
did, yeah,
Wheeler
they
beat
did.
Kel?
I
Okay,
believe it was Kel. I think Kel got that win. Yeah,
okay, yeah.
I'll
So
double
so
I'll double check that here in a second. Kel won that one 42-28.
42-28. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So I think maybe that's a little bit of a surprising score after Kel, you know, kind of got blanked by
Mm-hmm.
Sequoyah. I thought maybe they would be a lower scoring team, and how was South Paulding really doing in that after losing to North Paulding too? But anyway, all that to say that those were a couple of results that surprised me coming out of that one. The North Paulding result did for sure. I mean, again, beating South Paulding 38-14. Did not expect that from the Wolfpack. I thought that was going to be much closer of a game. And then I think just kind of on a more local level, including that, I thought River Ridge and Woodstock was a surprising result.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was surprising. I didn't think it was going to be that defensive, that low scoring. I think I even said on the podcast last week, if Woodstock wins, it'll be higher scoring. Well, they proved me wrong. So, that's a heck of a job by the Wolverines defense and special teams. Again, they had to be clean on special teams because it's prime example. If they had blocked a kick, then River Ridge would have won the game 17-14.
Right.
And we wouldn't be having this conversation. So,
Right.
those were some of the surprising results around the state for me.
All right. Well, Coop, as you mentioned, credit where credit is due. Woodstock deserves a credit. Getting that big win and moving to 1-0. Let's talk about Friday Night Lights on Preston. Oh, you guys had like a tsunami. You talked about it in the intro, talked about the weather you had, man. Uh, Games that you kind of took in last week or tried to take in because I think they all got postponed. And we did have a little competition. I'm glad it got postponed because I think, our stadium food competition, I think I was in a far last place on that as I was convinced by the concession workers at North Cobb that their nachos were the best thing that they had to offer. They were good, but they left something to be desired in terms of a competition. So, Coop, did you get to first? I know you were rained out in one game, eventually rained out in another one. Did you make it to the concession stand at all? Do we have to postpone our challenge for another week? And what's going on in Texas football?
So, food challenge first. We will have to postpone it. I did make it to the concession stand at the second game that I went to, and I will tell this story as briefly as possible. We were going to watch Salina and Waco La Vega. They were two top 10 teams, one in 4A Division One, one in 4A Division Two. For anyone that doesn't know, they're grouped by um, geography. So instead of having like 4A Region 1, Region 2, Region 3, Region 4, they do the same thing. But because Texas is such a large state, they keep teams that are south in their own bracket and teams that are north in their own bracket. So it would essentially be like having a region. They do have regions within the divisions, but it would just be insane if they were playing in the playoffs because if you're the 4 seed in 4A Division 1 and they were all in one, then you might go play somebody in Houston, then the next week you'll go play somebody in Austin and then Waco. Well, your 3 playoff games are all 3 hours away. Versus Georgia, where if you're the 4 seed, you may have to go down to Lowndes, but the next week you're going to play somebody in Atlanta, so it evens out a little bit. Anyway, all that being said, got stormed out, so then we went home. And as I'm sitting there, I just can't shake this feeling that the stadium lights are on at the school down south in Prosper. And I thought, no way they're playing. So I pull up NFHS Network, and sure enough, man, they're warming up. So I said, let's go down there. So we went back and watched Gunner again, the Gunner Tigers. Again, they are the 3-time reigning state champ in 3A, and they were taking on Richland Prosper, who literally opened a couple months ago. So it's a brand new school. They've only played 2 games of football. We got to watch a quarter and a half. Gunner was up 28-6 with 50 seconds left in the first half, and then they got lightning delayed, and we went home and they canceled the game. So yes, we made it to the concession stand, but the concession stand was not operating anything with electricity because of the lightning. So it was, you can have a Chick-fil-A sandwich, which just feels like a cop-out because they didn't really make it. Kind of, went through the drive-through. So I don't think it's fair to include that. So we'll postpone it to this week. Good news is we don't have any storms in the vicinity. This week we got a heck of a ball game. Gunner and Salina. Again, this is the 4A Division 1 state champ taking on the 3A state champ. It's going to be played at a neutral site in Melissa, Texas. They have a facility that holds 10,000 people, and they will be relocating there. So it'll be a neutral site game for both teams. Expected to be a sellout of the 10,000 seat stadium. I will be including pictures for everyone to see, because it's a heck of a facility and also a heck of a game, and it's kind of like a rivalry. It's like, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but it's like Pickens and Gilmer. They're both very similar in that way. So, but we're hoping for some good football. But overall, our teams looked good. Salina did play the game on Saturday at noon. They went to South Texas to play it, and they did come away with the win. So our teams look good. I think all of our teams won. I don't think anybody lost. So we're 10-0 for our coverage area so far in the state of Texas.
You know how to pick winners over there, Coop. Look, one of the hardest working men in covering high school football in 2 states, and the commitment to go home and then see the stadium lights from home, and the commitment to go back out after you had been through like I wish, again, I hope you share the video of like the rainstorm that you that you had endured. Looked like torrential rains on what we might have seen coming through in a hurricane. I don't want to take that lightly, but it was certainly a torrential downpour. But Coop, the hardest working man in high school football, FNL on Preston. If you guys want to follow his podcast, his Twitter handle, it's a great, again, I believe it's a great short form podcast. Coop does it all alone. you know, if you're like me, you can't get enough high school football. Tap into that. And check out what's going on in to our west in what they call one of the greatest states in the union. But down here in Georgia, we do it pretty good too. And but we just are grateful for Coop as he's covering both from a distance, and certainly glad to have him here. Continuing on the North Georgia Sports Network, because I don't know where I'd be without him. So Coop, we appreciate you, man.
Hey, I appreciate you too, brother. There's nobody I'd rather do this with than with you, and be covering Cherokee County. As great as the teams are here, man, there's nothing like home. So I'm glad to still be a part of it.
Man, I appreciate it, Coop. That's gonna wrap us up for this week. Just a quick note: I'll be taking a road trip this week on the radio station WLJA 101.1, the pulse of high school football in Georgia, Coop, as Dave Garner will tell it. And I will be in studio, on location at North Murray High School in Chatsworth as the Battle of Chatsworth happens, as the North Murray Mountaineers take on the Murray County Indians, home of the Fighting Billy Napiers. And of course, legendary coach Bill Napier, Billy Napier's dad, long time coach up there in Murray County, all-time wins leader in the Murray County Hall of Fame. So if you need or have a hankering for a game that you're trying to listen to on the radio, 10.1 The Pulse.com, 1011thepulse.com, I think is where you can tune in to find us. We'll try to get some score updates as well for you through the week. Other ways to watch games. Chiefs TV on YouTube is a great opportunity. I know that Cherokee will probably be live streaming those in Coop. They're on YouTube, if I'm not mistaken. What's Cherokee's link to there? Do you have that? Do you know that off the top of your head?
Ooh, put me on the spot. I know for Woodstock, it's Woodstock Live. And
Okay.
if you will just buy me like 30 seconds, I will find it for you,
I
partner.
can buy you 30 seconds, but I want to say that it's just great that our local high schools, AVTF, their video production departments, are really getting on the action and bringing these games to you as well. Coop, you got that link for Cherokee yet, or you need 10 more seconds?
10 more seconds.
All right.
I got it. We're
okay.
good. It is Warrior Studio.
All right. So there we have it. Warrior Studio. You got Woodstock Live. You got Chiefs TV. Ways to catch those games. And again, if you want to catch an out of county game and listen to an old fashioned game on the radio, Dave Garner, myself, Art Mosley, and Jackson Wright will be bringing the action to you live from Chatsworth, Georgia. Coop, that's going to do it for tonight, man. Great job as always. I appreciate you putting this together. I appreciate your banter. I think we have a lot to talk about. We certainly appreciate Coach Williams getting him back on the podcast, and Coach Teter certainly coming back, who we've had a few times on. And best of luck to all of our Cherokee County teams who are facing out of county opponents, Coop. So we can root for all 5 of these teams. Nobody has to, if you're a Grizzly fan, you can root for Woodstock this week, and if you're a River Ridge fan, you can root for Sequoyah this week. And, if you're an Etowah fan, you can just eat your popcorn and cheer for everybody this week. How about that?
There you go.
Coop, we appreciate it, man. And we'll talk to you next week.